Before cities and empires, we were wanderers on this pale blue dot. Our journey began in flickering firelight, painting stories on cave walls. As tools evolved from stone to bronze, so did we. Now, gaze upon the wonders of ancient civilizations. Pyramids, ziggurats, great walls. This is humanity's greatest journey, written in the stars and etched in stone. Long before the printing press, long before parchment, ink or paper, human beings discovered something extraordinary. Not fire, not the wheel, but something far more invisible, a way to capture thought itself. It began in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. Roughly 5,000 years ago, in the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, people began pressing wedge-shaped marks into soft clay. At first they weren't trying to write poetry or philosophy. They were keeping count of sheep, of barley, of beer. This was not art, it was accounting. And yet it was the beginning of something world-changing. From the Nile to the Yellow River, from the Indus Valley to the jungles of Mesoamerica, civilizations would soon develop their own systems of symbols. Some we can still read. Others remain silent, but all of them in their own way whisper the same truth. That writing was not merely a tool, it was a revolution. In ancient Sumer, cities were growing. With growth came complexity trade, property, contracts, temple offerings. Memory was no longer enough, and so necessity gave birth to record-keeping. Using a sharpened reed and wet clay, the Sumerians developed cuneiform, Latin for wedge-shaped. At first, pictograms, a stylized fish, a jar, a head. But as the needs of bureaucracy expanded, the symbols became more abstract, and soon sentences emerged. Words for king and god could now be combined. Ideas could be joined, questioned, debated. Writing, once a ledger of things, became a mirror of thought. In Egypt, writing was no less revolutionary, but far more sacred. Here the word was divine. Hieroglyphs, sacred carvings, were not tools of common merchants. They adorned tombs and temples, reserved for gods and kings. To write was to participate in Ma'at, the cosmic order. Through symbols of falcons, ankhs and eyes, Egyptian scribes preserved rituals, laws, medical knowledge, even love poetry. They believed that by writing the name of a person or a god, they could keep their soul alive forever. To forget a name was death, to write it was immortality. In the Indus Valley, along the now dry riverbeds of what is today Pakistan and northwest India, another civilization flourished. They built cities on a grid. They mastered drainage, craft and trade, and they wrote. We've found hundreds of symbols inscribed on seals, pottery, weights, but what they mean, no one knows. The Indus script has never been deciphered. Was it a language? A ritual code? A proto-script? Until we find a Rosetta Stone of the Indus world, its voice remains just out of reach, a lost tongue from a silent city. In ancient China, writing emerged not from trade, but from prophecy. During the Shang dynasty, royal diviners inscribed questions on animal bones and turtle shells. Will the harvest be good? Should we go to war? Will the king's son survive? These were oracle bones, the ancestors of Chinese script. Their markings are the direct lineage of modern Chinese characters. From spiritual tool to civil device, writing in China became the instrument of governance, history, poetry and identity, lasting more than 3,000 years. By 500 BCE, writing was no longer rare. In Mesopotamia, scribes recorded contracts, myths and star charts. In Egypt, they composed hymns to Ra. In China, the Book of Documents shaped political thought. And across Mesoamerica, early scripts began tracking time with celestial precision. Though separated by oceans and time, civilizations across the world came to the same conclusion, that symbols could bind memory, power and imagination. Writing changed us. It allowed thoughts to outlive thinkers. It turned speech into stone and memory into monument. Every word we write today, on paper, on screens, in code, is part of a story that began with a stylus in the sand. A story not of technology, but of humanity. Before the pyramids pierced the sky, before Rome cast its shadow across continents, there was a place where cities first breathed and kings first ruled, a land of rivers, of reeds, of gods and empires, Mesopotamia. The word Mesopotamia means the land between two rivers. But for the ancients, it meant something far more profound, a place where humans first dared to live together in cities. By 3000 BCE, the Sumerians had built the world's first true cities, Uruk, Ur, Eridu, crowded, bustling, planned. They planted wheat, raised cattle and measured out trade in silver and barley. And at their heart stood something monumental, the ziggurat. Massive stepped temples, reaching to the heavens, devoted to the gods. But they were more than temples. They were statements of power, of cosmic order imposed on mud and chaos. In these early cities, rulers were not just kings, they were high priests, intermediaries between gods and men. Divine sanction was not a luxury, it was the source of authority. The Sumerians gave us a word, lugal, meaning big man. But kingship was more than muscle. It required record-keeping, diplomacy, law. Trade flowed, ideas spread, and so did ambition. Around 2300 BCE, a man named Sargon rose from obscurity. Born a cupbearer, he became a conqueror. With sword and strategy, he forged something the world had never seen, an empire. From the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean coast, dozens of city-states bowed to Akkad. But Sargon ruled not just through force. He standardized weights. He appointed loyal governors. He spread Akkadian language and cuneiform across his realm. He called himself King of the Four Quarters of the Earth, a claim few had dared and fewer would match. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, but the spirit of Mesopotamia endured, and in time a new city would rise to claim the legacy of kings, Babylon. Under King Hammurabi, Babylon became more than a capital. It became an idea, a place where justice was not just an ideal, but a code. Written in stone for all to see, 282 laws governing theft, trade, marriage, property and crime. Punishment was harsh, but the message was clear. Law was no longer in the hands of the powerful alone. It was the foundation of the state. This was not merely law, it was legitimacy. In Mesopotamia, humans invented more than the empire. They invented the state, with borders, taxes, bureaucracies. They invented the city, a machine of people, stone and ideas. And they invented the soul, a concept of life, death and divine justice. From these clay cities came the epic of Gilgamesh, the myths of gods and floods, the first glimpses of mortality and meaning. They asked, why do we die? What makes a king just? Can a name outlive death? Today we walk among ruins, but these were once living cities of markets and music, prayers and power. Mesopotamia gave us our first map of how civilization might work, and how inevitably it might fall. The Sumerians built the first cities. The Akkadians dreamed of empire. Babylon codified justice. Together they laid the first bricks of the world we know. And though time has washed their empires away, the rivers still run, and the story of the cradle of civilization still flows. Every civilization has its river, but none has worshipped it like the Egyptians worshipped the Nile. From its sacred waters came life. From its banks rose cities, temples and tombs. And in its rhythm, flood and harvest, birth and death, was written the very heartbeat of Egypt. This was the eternal kingdom. To the Greeks, Egypt was the gift of the Nile. Each year the river would rise, spilling over its banks and feeding the land with black silt, rich, fertile, divine. Without it, Egypt would be a desert. With it, it became one of the most enduring civilizations in human history. But Egypt's miracle was not just agricultural, it was spiritual. At the center stood the pharaoh, not just a king but a living god. He was the son of Ra, the sun god, the embodiment of Ma'at, truth, order, harmony. To obey the pharaoh was to obey the universe. To rebel was to risk cosmic collapse. He led in war, he governed the land, he built for the gods and for eternity. Perhaps no monument captures the scale of Egyptian ambition more than the pyramid. Built not with machines but with muscle and will, the pyramids of Giza stand as a testament to the power of divine kingship and human perseverance. Tens of thousands laboured over decades to prepare a king for the afterlife. But the pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a cosmic machine, aligned to the stars, inscribed with prayers, built to last forever. Egyptian life was guided by myth. Their gods were everywhere, in sky and soil, in the sun and the lotus, in the breath of cattle and the beating of the heart. The most sacred story was the journey of the soul. At death, the heart was weighed against a feather, too heavy with sin, and it was devoured by a monster. Balanced, and the soul joined the stars. Death was not an end, it was a transformation, a continuation, if one lived a life of harmony. Egypt was a land of stone and of symbols. Hieroglyphs were more than writing. They were spoken pictures, each one carrying layers of meaning, divine and human. Temples were not just places of prayer, but centers of learning, healing and law. From the movements of the stars to the mixing of remedies, Egyptian knowledge shaped medicine, mathematics and timekeeping for centuries to come. But no kingdom lasts forever. Egypt's greatness would fade, invaded by Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks and Romans. The pharaohs would fall. The hieroglyphs would go unread for nearly 2,000 years. But the Nile still flows, the pyramids still rise, and the vision of Egypt as a realm where gods walked among men continues to fascinate us. Egypt endures not just in stone, but in story. It taught us how to rule, how to build, how to ask what lies beyond death. Its mysteries invite us to look backward and forward, to wonder what we will leave behind. For Egypt is more than an ancient kingdom, it is an eternal idea, that humanity, when guided by vision and belief, can shape time itself. In the sands of present-day Pakistan and northwest India lie the bones of a civilization that rose, flourished and vanished. No pyramids, no known kings, no wars carved in stone, no deciphered writing to explain who they were or where they went, only streets in perfect order, drains that still whisper of water, and symbols, so many symbols that no one can read. 5,000 years ago, when Egypt raised pyramids and Sumer built ziggurats, another people quietly shaped an urban marvel. Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, Lothal. These were cities of geometry and foresight, built on grid patterns with sophisticated sewage and freshwater systems. Every house had access to water. Trash was managed. The streets, angled for drainage, aligned to the stars. No palaces, no temples, no signs of kings. In the Indus world, it seems society ruled itself. Across these cities, archaeologists have found thousands of small seals, each marked with symbols: a bird, a trident, a figure with arms raised. Beneath them, scripts, short, sharp, symmetrical. Over 400 unique signs have been catalogued, yet no one knows what they say. Are they words, syllables, concepts? Despite a century of research, the Indus script remains uncracked. No Rosetta Stone, no bilingual key, just silence. We can see repetition, structure, but without longer texts we're grasping at shadows. The Indus Valley was not isolated. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of Mesopotamia, Indus merchants carried goods and ideas. They traded beads, cotton, lapis lazuli. In return, copper, tin, and exotic stories. They mastered metallurgy. They designed weights with mathematical precision. They spun the world's first known cotton cloth, and perhaps most intriguingly, they seemed to have valued equality. No mansions, no slave quarters, just cities of shared scale and common dignity. Around 1900 BCE, the cities began to empty. Not with a bang, but a slow retreat. Theories abound. Climate change, tectonic shifts, a vanishing river. Without the monsoon-fed waters, the cities could no longer survive. Others suggest overfarming, disease, or changing trade routes. But what's certain is this: the writing ceased, the houses crumbled, and the world forgot. What remained was swallowed by earth, sand, and time. It wasn't until the 20th century that the Indus Valley emerged again, from beneath railway embankments and colonial curiosity. And what they found astonished the modern world: a Bronze Age society with no known kings, no conquests, and no glory carved in stone, just planning, peace, and a script that refuses to speak. Today, linguists, computer scientists, and archaeologists continue to search for the key, and in that search lies something profound. The Indus people left no epic poems, no statues of pharaohs, no inscriptions of victory, only cities, clean, thoughtful, enduring, only symbols, haunting, beautiful, silent. Perhaps a civilization doesn't need to shout to be great. They built without empire, they ruled without kings, they wrote without words we can read. But they left behind something just as powerful, a mystery that still shapes the edge of our understanding of who we are. In the middle of northern China, a river flows, sometimes calm, sometimes wild. It has fed people, destroyed things, and shaped lives for many thousands of years. They call it Huanghe, the Yellow River, and all along its winding path, a civilization grew. It became one of the oldest, longest-lasting civilizations in all of human history. This is the story of China's first dynasties, where heaven and earth were linked by rituals, bronze objects, and fortune-telling. Over 5,000 years ago, in a land of dust and floods, villages started to pop up along the river. They planted millet, they raised pigs, dogs, and silkworms, they decorated pottery and carved jade. These were the Yangshao, Longshan, and early Tu cultures, the very beginnings of Chinese civilization. In early Tu, archaeologists dug up bronze workshops, palaces, and ceremonial roads. Some think this was the capital of the Xia dynasty, a dynasty remembered not in writing but in old stories. By 1600 BCE, the Shang dynasty took over in the Yellow River area. Here, writing, religion, and the king's power came together in a new way. They talked to the gods with fire and bone, heating animal bones until they cracked, then studying those cracks to see what the future held. These were the earliest known Chinese characters, the great-grandparents of writing still used today. The Shang people were experts at working with metal. They made bronze objects not for war, but for worship. Big, beautiful bronze vessels were gifts to ancestors and gods. For the Shang people, the spirits of the dead controlled what happened to the living, and the king spoke for them. Around 1046 BCE, the Zhou dynasty defeated the Shang, and with their victory they brought an idea that would shape China for over 2,000 years. Heaven, they said, didn't give power just because of family. Power came from being good. A bad ruler could lose the mandate, a good one could earn it. It was more than just talk. It was like a deal between the rulers and the people. The Zhou spread across China by giving regional leaders land and titles in return for their loyalty. China became not one kingdom, but many small states connected by rituals, bronze objects, and shared beliefs. The Zhou era wasn't just a time of complicated politics, it was where Chinese thought began. Books like the Book of Documents, Book of Rites, and Book of Songs taught how to rule, how to grieve, how to live a good life. Life was organized by rituals. Doing the right rituals kept balance between heaven and earth. These early Chinese people weren't just building cities. They were building a way of seeing the world, one that valued harmony, tradition, and the moral duties of leaders. A very important early Chinese story was about the Great Flood and the hero who controlled it, Yu the Great. Whether real or legendary, the story showed something important, that civilization in China was always a fight against water, against chaos, and the true king, the good ruler, was the one who brought peace and order. The Yellow River is often called China's sorrow because of the floods it causes, but it is also China's soul. It was here that cities were built, kings ruled, and new ideas grew, where ancestors were respected and characters were carved in bone and bronze. Through war, different rulers, and big changes, the language, the rituals, and the vision of the universe born here have lasted. Between heaven and earth, the ancient Chinese imagined a world ruled by order, goodness, and respect. And from those early ideas, a civilization grew that would never look back. Long before the Maya etched time into stone, long before the Aztecs built their great island city, there was the mother of them all. A civilization shrouded in rainforest and mystery, a people who carved kings into mountains and time into stars. This is the world of the Olmecs, Mesoamerica's first great civilization. They stare across the centuries, 17 massive stone heads, weighing up to 50 tons each, chiseled from volcanic basalt, dragged across swamps and rivers. They bear the faces of rulers, priests, perhaps gods. We do not know their names, but their expressions are unmistakable, stern, proud, powerful. These were no ordinary people. They were leaders of a civilization that laid the foundation for all that followed. The Olmec flourished between 1400 and 400 BCE along the Gulf Coast of present-day Mexico. Their cities, San Lorenzo, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, were among the first true urban centers in the Americas. These were sacred landscapes, designed not only for living, but for aligning with the cosmos. Their temples pointed to stars, their altars marked solstices, their gods lived in the mountains, the jaguars, the sky. Though their writing remains partially undeciphered, Olmec symbols hint at deep astronomical knowledge. They tracked Venus, they marked eclipses, they measured cycles of time, centuries before the Maya refined the calendar. To the Olmec, the heavens weren't distant. They were a guidebook, a clock by which the world was built and rebuilt. Central to Olmec belief was the jaguar, a creature that moved between worlds. Some scholars believe these represent shamans, ritual specialists who entered altered states to commune with gods and ancestors. Their gods were elemental: storm, maize, fire, water. But their mythology was cosmic. From underworld caves to mountaintop altars, Olmec society was saturated with spiritual meaning. Life was a cycle of transformation, sacrifice, and rebirth. The Olmec were master craftsmen. They polished jade until it gleamed like water. They carved mirrors from iron ore. They created one of the first ball games, played not just for sport, but as a reenactment of cosmic struggle. Their artistic style and religious symbols would ripple outward into the Maya, Zapotec, and Aztec civilizations. They were not a lost people. They were the seed. Around 400 BCE, Olmec cities were abandoned. Why? Climate change? Invasion? Internal decline? The heads were buried, the temples left to vines and time. But their ideas lived on. Their gods were reborn in other names, their ball courts rebuilt in other lands, their cosmic rhythms encoded into other calendars. The Olmecs vanished, but Mesoamerica remembered. In the jungle they still watch us, faces carved from mountains staring across centuries. They do not speak, but they do not need to. The Olmecs were the first to carve time into stone, the first to measure the heavens, the first to imagine a world where men became gods. And gods returned to earth as jaguars. They were Mesoamerica's first great dreamers, and their dreams echo still, in stone, in stars, and in us. The earliest civilizations rose beside rivers, but they did not survive on water alone. Floods, famines, rivalries, ambition all threatened to return society to chaos. To endure, humans needed something greater than kings. Greater than gods, they needed law. They needed the state. In the heart of Babylon, nearly 4,000 years ago, King Hammurabi carved justice into stone. 282 laws, etched in cuneiform for all to see, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But Hammurabi's code was more than revenge. It outlined contracts, wages, property, marriage, inheritance. It made clear who could do what, and what would happen if they broke the rules. For the first time, society was governed not by whim, but by principle. But law needs more than words, it needs a system. As cities grew, so too did complexity: taxes, soldiers, irrigation, roads. To manage it all, rulers built something revolutionary: bureaucracy. In Mesopotamia, Egypt and China, the temple became the office. Priests became clerks. Divine offerings became state revenues. From this fusion of sacred and secular emerged something new: the organized state. In the ancient world, law was not yet secular. To break it was to violate the cosmos. In Egypt, the king embodied Ma'at, the divine order that balanced the universe. In China, early rulers claimed the mandate of heaven, a heavenly license to rule justly or lose the throne. In the Indus Valley, uniform weights and standardized seals suggested a system of economic regulation, without evidence of kings at all. Everywhere, society was learning power must be structured and law must be seen. Writing gave rulers a gift memory that never faded. Law was no longer oral, susceptible to mischief and forgetting. It was inscribed. From Hammurabi's stele to Egypt's scrolls to China's Book of Rights, rulers used law to justify power and to limit it. The state became permanent even if kings did not. Its archives became its soul. But law was not always fair. It often protected the powerful. It punished the poor. In Babylon, penalties varied by class. In Egypt, justice served both pharaoh and the elite. Still, law gave people expectations. It gave merchants contracts, farmers boundaries, families inheritance, and through this fragile framework it built a kind of peace. Not a utopia, but a containment of chaos. From the ziggurats of Ur to the court of the Shang kings, the idea of the state was born. Not just a king, not just a city, but a system of laws, taxes, duties, justice, a structure that outlived its rulers, an agreement, spoken or silent, between people and power. We live in that legacy. We inherit its architecture, of government, of justice, of the rule of law. In the beginning, the strong ruled. But slowly a new idea emerged, that law, not blood, should bind us, that rules, not fear, should govern us. It began as lists of fines and punishments. It became the foundation of kingdoms, empires, civilizations. We are still perfecting it, still arguing over it. But the idea that order must come from justice is one of our greatest human inventions.